FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and it's August 12th, 2019. Well, gold prices continue to rise, up $8 the ounce. We're back over 1,500. Silver's up 4 cents the ounce. Hey, just got back from a family vacation to Bermuda, and lots to talk about there that we'll cover later. As always, questions, comments, be a part of the show, and email us, KL@KerryLutz.com. Well, you probably heard that Trump went nuclear on tariffs. He raised or imposed an additional 10% tariff on another $300 billion worth of Chinese exports to the United States. It's not sitting well with China. They've got their own problems. If you've been watching what's going on in Hong Kong, these people in Hong Kong, if you're not familiar with the situation, they have been living in relative personal freedom of expression, tranquility, freedom to pursue happiness, a little foreign concept there that you might find in the Declaration of Independence. Well, they're rebelling now. Is that part of the Trump tariffs? Has Trump effectively given the green light to those in Hong Kong to really hit the streets? Or are they just totally unrelated? You know, a wise politician once said there's no coincidences when it comes to politics. And it's no coincidence that we've got Michael Stumo on with us. He's the CEO of Coalition for a Prosperous America, CPA, also known as. And you can find Michael as well as other people's work over at prosperousamerica.org. So, Michael, you're watching what's going on in China, more tariffs, more talk, more mudslinging. What do you make of Hong Kong? Do you think it's related? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think there would have been a Hong Kong crackdown anyway when China took over Hong Kong from Great Britain. China was, plays the long game. They always do. Of course, our trade deficit funds their military buildup. It funds their police state. But it's a real big irritant to have a free principality like Hong Kong inside the body of China. And they'd already installed their leadership and the governorship of Hong Kong, wouldn't let opposition candidates run for office. They're still jailing political opponents, have been for some time. And so Hong Kong was going to happen. Whether the trade war accelerated the timeline or not, I'm not sure. There were certainly plenty other steps ahead of time in cracking down and putting surveillance up in the city and starting to have, social scores on people. So it's possible it accelerated the timeline, and but Hong Kong was gonna erupt whenever they did it, and they're doing it now.
And the Chinese are known for these riots. They just have them periodically, and really they've got no other venue here, no other choice. There's no soap box that they can stand on in the park. There is no outlet for what's going on there. So really, you shouldn't be surprised about riots, should you?
No, look, the core governing contract between the Communist Party of China and the people of China is the government is that we will repress you, but you will have a job and your kids will be better off than you are. And that's why they need to have this trade surplus with the U.S. so that they produce more goods and they can consume there. They sell more to the U.S. They employ people get higher wages, and then they'll tolerate the repression. But with the U.S. Cutting off increasingly access to our market, that is our leverage. Anyone who talks about China's tools in the trade war, they haven't been paying attention. Our leverage is we cut off access to our market. They internally get poorer. People get out of work. You get more people decide, well, you know what? The economic benefit isn't really worth it anymore. This repression is really something that we're really tired of. And so it's going to get worse as this trade war continues on, and it'll expand beyond Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm. So this is a sign of things to come. So what does it mean for a place like Taiwan? Where do they find themselves now?
Right. Taiwan has to, could be more risky as well. But China might decide that they don't have the money to do much more than restore order inside their country. They're still, have Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps by the millions in northwest China. They are still repressing the Falun Gong. Anyone that's not a Han Chinese, the Chinese are the most racist people in the world, the Han Chinese, and they repress anyone of different Chinese origin, from the Tibetans to the Falun Gong to the Uyghur Muslims. So they're going to probably have their hands full internally, and hopefully that doesn't get messy. But what we do know is that every time we buy from China and have a trade deficit with them, every dollar that goes over there helps fund the state-owned enterprises and their military buildup. We need to start trading. Why are we trading with China when we didn't trade with the Soviet Union much? This is going to be a new version of a Cold War.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's really challenging times ahead here. Is Trump doing the right thing here, or is this potentially going to blow up in his face?
Oh, he's absolutely doing the right thing, because if you did anything else, if we continued the way that Clinton, Bush, and Obama continued, we would have China become much stronger, quicker. They would overtake us as the world's economic superpower, and soon after, political superpower. And that is something that cannot happen. So when Reagan did the Plaza Accord and devalued the dollar, so Japan couldn't use an undervalued yen to have a huge trade surplus with us and get rich off of our market, that actually stopped Japan's rise, and they faded into the sunset. We're no longer a challenge. That's what's going to happen with China, but it's trickier. It's trickier with China because they're so big. They're not a small island in the northern Pacific. But it's got to be done. You couldn't continue the same way. So the tariff action and the currency action are absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like, what are the chances of this thing getting out of hand? And will they look for external enemies, of which the U.S. is the prime one? What's going to happen? Is this potentially war? I mean, it is an economic war. I guess we've been in an economic war with China all these years, and we just perhaps didn't want to admit it or take notice of it.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Trilogy Metals is a world-class developer in Alaska's Ambler mining district. The company already possesses 8 billion pounds of copper, 3 billion pounds of zinc, over 1 million gold-equivalent ounces, and now over 77 million pounds of cobalt. Trilogy's Arctic project boasts an after-tax net present value of $1.4 billion with a 33% IRR. Trilogy is led by an experienced management team with proven success in discovering and developing projects in Alaska. The company is well capitalized, has no debt, and possesses strong institutional support. Trilogy trades on the New York and Toronto exchanges under the ticker symbol TMQ. To learn more, go to trilogymetals.com. That's trilogymetals.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Well, we need to continue diplomacy and not to give up our national interests, but continue diplomacy, continue connecting with them, even as we protect our own interests. So continue with the tariffs, continue rebalancing trade, but that doesn't mean you accept 39 different ways that they aggressively steal or acquire our intellectual property. You don't say, okay, you can be a criminal part of the time. But you still have to keep up the diplomacy. But the number one issue is to prevent the erosion of U.S. economic, military, and geopolitical power, and protect our economy.
Yeah. So it's easier said than done, though. Of course. What what about our allies? Do you think they're going to jump on board for this? Are they going to be with us here, or are they're going to do what they always do?
Yeah, they don't have the resolve. They're not used to being a world leader. They're not part of the game of great powers, really. They don't have the resolve. And, sometimes they'll join us in a complaint at the World Trade Organizations. Sometimes, they'll do a wink and a nod, appreciate what you're doing. Also, most of them have a lot of them have a trade surplus or not much of a deficit with China. So China's actually predating on the U.S. market more than theirs. So it's not such a direct threat to them immediately. But we've seen multilateral negotiations happen with China as to China's actions on currency for 15 years. There's Hank Paulson under Bush engaged in strategic and economic dialogue with him. Jack Lew, Treasury Secretary for Obama, did the same thing. It came to nothing. We've had APEC, Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation conferences. We've had G20s. We've had IMF. They talk all the time in these forums about China's being unbalanced, doing wrong things. Been a few WTO cases. So we've already tried that, and it hasn't worked. And now it's time for constructive unilateralism, which is what we're doing.
Yeah. So what about this concept that we're actually decoupling from China, our economy? How's that going to work out?
Well, there's a lot of other places. Look, the world's awash in excess labor looking for something to produce. And China decoupling was in a way happening before the trade war because China was becoming more expensive to produce in than other Southeast Asian countries. So there was already a movement going on. And of course, the tariff war, us responding to their trade war that started in 94, has accelerated that. And we were just fine not trading with the Soviet Union during the Cold War in the Eastern Bloc. We grew pretty strongly. And the world's a big place. China's a big country. The world's a big place. We're going to have, there's plenty of places in the U.S. to produce. There's plenty of places in other countries to produce. We'll be just fine. So if we go beyond balancing trade to an actual decoupling, that's a good thing in my view.
But at some point, the rest of the world's going to have to pick sides, isn't it?
That's what happens. That's what they're doing now. That's what China's OBOR, One Belt, One Road strategy is basically their own Soviet bloc equivalent to get allies and get them dependent on Chinese debt rather than on the U.S. So there's always alliances and shifting alliances, and now when it's between the U.S. and China, that's what's happening. So we do have to respond. But understand, some people say that our alliances are our number one core competency. That's not really true. Our core competency is our own wealth and power from our economic strength and our industrial strength. Without that, people have no reason to listen to us because we can't even run a successful country, and we don't have the economic might that justifies being a great power. So you got to start with that.
So is what Trump's doing, is it too little, too late, or is it just in time?
No, I think it's not too little, too late. I think he's ratcheting up the tariffs over time, giving businesses time to react. In fact, this latest 10% on the last $300 billion of Chinese imports won't go into effect until September. I think it's highly likely that at some point it'll go up to 25%. We'll have 25% across the board tariffs. But all the time, companies have, some time. If they've invested there, they were already looking to go somewhere else. But a lot of them are just buying from Chinese enterprises, so they can just switch their procurement contracts to U.S. suppliers or other countries' suppliers. So that's not a big transition cost.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, remember when I said when Reagan realigned the dollar versus the yen and the Deutschmark with the Plaza Accord in 1985, so Japan was no longer able to use its undervalued, manipulated currency as a weapon against us. Mm-hmm. That was when Japan was done rising. They didn't have the excessive growth. China had, 16% growth in the 90s, 10% growth in the aughts, 6 to 8% now, if you believe them. But certainly they grew pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take away the U.S. consumer market as their punch bowl, their economic threat is highly likely to, and military, certainly economic, to slow or go away. It makes it very hard for them to make the case that they should be the new leader of the world.
Yeah. Well, I guess we're going to see how this is going to shake out. certainly the price of gold has been going up. There's a lot of economic uncertainty around the world. Is this a potential for another global recession or perhaps even depression?
Yeah, the U.S. is doing better than other economies right now. But recessions are always possible. I don't have a crystal ball on that one, but certainly wages are up in this country, so purchasing power is up, and that's helpful.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's one of those things we're just going to watch and have to see how it unfolds here, because we're kind of in uncharted territory, aren't we?
Well, we really are. A lot of the economic relationships that used to be received wisdom, like tariffs are taxes on consumers and will cause inflation. We're not seeing inflation. It's saying that the Phillips curve, meaning when you have low unemployment, that's going to push up inflation, and we're not seeing that. Probably because the quality of employment is so far down because of our service industry, and we're not a manufacturing industry intensity like we used to be with the good jobs. So the jobs people have aren't as good as they used to be. Part of it is that there's a global oversupply of goods that you just can't raise prices much anyway because someone else will flood in and take your market. And when Asia came online, that oversupply globally became a new reality here. So a lot of the old economic concepts aren't working these days.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So it's a whole different ballgame, and nobody exactly knows the rules yet, and it's still unfolding. So how long is this going to take, do you think, till we figure out exactly the effect that we're going to encounter?
Well, I think we're seeing it right now. I mean, the tariffs from last year have been pro-growth for the U.S. I think we'll see exchange rates being pro-growth if the administration starts realigning the dollar so it's a competitive and not a non-competitive high price. That's pro-growth in every country. That's an economic relationship that hasn't faltered yet. And just to make sure you have a diverse industrial economy that produces good jobs, innovation, and products is about the strongest base you can have. You want to make sure that your real economy is producing. And, we see the stock market fluctuate on the Trump tariff announcements, and people scream Armageddon again. And they just need to take a breath and wait, because in 2 weeks it comes back, or less than a week, it comes back. And the stock market rose all through the tariffs last year. So it's not saying the stock market can't get too high, which it was in 2009. That's a little bit different issue. But so long as we have production and jobs, we're not leaking all that demand overseas, depending on, overseas workers, when we could be depending on our own workers. That's a much stronger position to be in.
Yeah, it certainly appears that way. Well, we're just going to have to see how this unfolds. So it's a Coalition for Prosperous America.org. That's where we find you and your work?
Yes, sir.
All right. And questions or comments, just email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Hey, Michael, it's always great having you on. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.